Good afternoon. So my name is Max Galash from CoinChange Financials. We're here to discuss the future of cryptocurrency and the recent crypto boom. I'd like to introduce a few speakers today. So we have Eric from HG Exchange. We have Ali from Blockchain Fund. We have Darius from QCP Capital. And we'd like to start with each of them introducing themselves and talking about their business. And then we'll probably announce the topic that we're gonna start the discussion first. So Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about the business and yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Eric. Basically, having about 20 years of combined experience across capital markets, fintech, entrepreneurship, and volunteerism. At present, I'm the president of HGX, which is Southeast Asia's first member-driven private securities exchange, awarded the Monetary Authority of Singapore's recognized market operator license in June, with the unique capabilities to support issuance, tokenization, and secondary trading of both digital and non-digital alternative investment products, distributing to a global growing network of about 500,000 investors. So I'm pleased to be part of this leadership panel today to share our views and discussion ahead. Thank you, Max. Over to you.
Thanks, Eric. We have Ali. He's experienced venture investor, and he's going to talk a little bit about the fund and his experience. Ali, to you.
Absolutely. So Ali Mitavji, managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund. We invest in and help venture build top-tier startups. We now have over 55 portfolio companies on the equity side in the crypto and blockchain space. We're also limited partners on several other funds, including Loyal VC and Draper Goren Home, and work with as well organizations such as the United Nations on how blockchain can help alleviate poverty and achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as supporting organizations such as INSEAD as Senior Blockchain Fellow. And then I do serve on the board of two public companies in the blockchain space. So one of those is CryptoStar, which is a Toronto Stock Exchange venture company, and the other is Mechanical Technologies, which is a NASDAQ listed company.
Great. Thanks, Ali. Darius, your turn. QCP
Hi,
Capital.
thank you. I'm Darius I'm founder of QCP Capital. I come from a hedge fund and banking background. I used to work at Diamond and BNP Paribas. Founded QCP in 2017. Long story short, we are about 70 people based in Singapore. We focus on a couple of things. We are global leaders in options and crypto derivatives. We run about $2 billion book. And we also focus a lot on spot flow in Asia. So, we trade crypto spot in local currencies like Sing Dollar, Malaysian Ringgit, Indonesian Rupiah, Thai Baht, and whatnot. We also have a asset management arm called Phillip Street Partners. It's a Singapore licensed fund manager. We run both a macro and VC fund there. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Darius. Great panel. I mean, various experiences, industries, and visions, right? So I think the first topic that we're gonna tackle, we should not be as trivial as discussing what's Bitcoin and what's the future. Let's look into the future of overall industry, cryptocurrency in general. So what do you guys think the future brings for digital assets, stable coins, and cryptocurrency in general? Who wants? Eric, maybe you should tackle it first based on your experience.
Sure. Thanks, Max. So we all know about the liquidity, the popularity of the cryptocurrency market. However, I'm very much intrigued, coming from HG Exchange, is looking at what is the reinvention that could be coming up in the near future. Things like we have seen interest coming in from issuers about looking at listings of NFTs, right? And looking at how to securitize it, corresponding, communicating with the regulators and stuff like that. At the same time, we're also having interest on utility tokens, right? That is real usage from issuers coming in. And all these are looking at tokenization. And last but not least, we have interest of looking at coming to us on using stablecoins for payments, right? From a regulated exchange perspective. So I think there seems to be a bridge that is forming of cryptocurrencies in the market utilizing blockchain to actually move or try to find a fit into the regulated space. It's not to say that regulation will restrict. It basically sets a very interesting framework for us. We tend to look at it as a framework rather than saying, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, right? So I think that's something that we see potentially that could be a move towards a bridge point. For instance, like MES has recently launched its Payment Services Act, and then they started recently then to issue the digital payment token to facilitate cryptocurrencies to operate in a framework within the local jurisdiction, and that sets a tone, I think, going forward to say how can the big boys, for example, like your Huobi exchange, your Binance, that's also in the news, and many others, to say, could they move into the space that we operate in? Case in point, Huobi actually has also set up a licensed asset management firm in Hong Kong with a crypto fund. And it's kind of interesting where you have an exchange as a parent, and then now you have an asset management arm that's licensed, right? So that's my takeaway in terms of the future coming. Yeah, thanks.
So you touched upon the NFTs, the securitization of the assets, the central bank or digital currency, as well as the stable coins, and the regulation aspect as a framework for all that to coexist. That's a complicated topic for sure, but we haven't really spoken about any of the blockchains, right, that underline an infrastructure of all the cryptocurrencies. So Ali, maybe you can touch upon the layer one view of the industry and the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're seeing right now, I mean, there's, of course, a number of different layer ones that are interesting, popular. I think you sort of see this theme, come up. I mean, there's different things that are popular at any given point, sort of any year, right? But, we are seeing things become more scalable, which I think is important, right? You are seeing, even though in some cases gas fees are going up on some of these chains, it's just because demand right now is sort of outstripping sort of the scaling. But I think it's starting to get better in certain aspects. I mean, if you take, for example, and it's not necessarily purely on say layer one in some ways, but you're seeing like for example, a lot of NFTs on OpenSea now going through Polygon as an example, right? And so you are seeing some of these challenges start to be solved from a scalability perspective, which is important because, for all of these networks to operate effectively, I mean, you need to have different functionality on different networks, right? So you can't be, having everyone try to buy a coffee on Bitcoin's network plus use it for everything else, right? And so you're going to see those smaller purchases end up on a different chain or a different sort of layer, right? And so, I do think that this is starting to get better. I think importantly, sustainability has also been at the forefront. And so you're seeing, for example, what Ethereum's done in terms of changes, proof of work to proof of stake, I think has really significantly changed the game in the way that people might look at some parts of blockchain. Now, I think it does open up the question, though, of whether proof of stake can actually be as secure when you launch a project, and whether or not the path that, can you skip the path that Ethereum took in terms of going proof of work first and then going proof of stake, or can you go straight to proof of stake? And I think that remains to be seen for projects that'll hopefully get as large as Ethereum, right? So, and you do see a lot of challenges, though, with some of these structures if you are too early on adopting them. So, proof of stake, you can have too much control too early in the network, which could pose some issues, for example, depending on how sort of the projects even launch from the start. So, But I would say it is getting better. At the end of the day, this is not an old technology, right? We're talking about, even at best, essentially 10 years. You know, and you know, you could even use a much shorter timeline if you're really counting, you know, the launch of some of the additional sort of protocols or blockchains, right? So this is in reality a very, very short period, even though, you know, to some of us in the crypto and blockchain space, it might feel like an eternity.
Yeah. Thanks, Ali. Thanks. I think that's a good segue to Darius. I mean, if we look at proprietary trading, if we look at the brokers, if we look at the infrastructure now behind the exchanges that exists today to enable the HFT, and the market has grown substantially, still fragmented market worldwide, still a lot of inefficiencies. So we'd like to hear, I mean, Darius, what about your view on the future of cryptocurrency trading and the infrastructure around it?
Yeah, maybe let me start by saying that you know, a lot of people always talk about, you know, the future adoption of cryptocurrency and the future use case. I think for us, it's always been a present thing, meaning that we see the use cases and we see the adoption very, very prevalently in the present. Let me just give you an example, right? You know, I mean, the way I see it is there's a very, very strong foundational adoption in Asia already. So you know, there are a lot of parties in especially Southeast Asian countries, right? Like that are not crypto natives, that are using stable coins as a very viable and feasible alternative for money transfer and for remittance. I mean, just to give you an example, we have a lot of, I mean, this is in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. These are guys who are not, who don't own a Bitcoin or don't own any Ethereum, but you know, they need to send money to China, for example, to pay their supplier. And you know, instead of going to the bank and taking 2 days to settle with 1 million questions, they are able to do a local transfer, buy stablecoin, send it to the supplier who accepts stablecoin, and everything is done in 5 minutes with a tiny spread. So I think, you know, the adoption is very, very real on the ground. It's something that we've seen very. I mean, that's the reason why the stable coins are are so big now, right? You know, it's in the multi-billions, because there's real adoption. So it's not a future thing; it's a present thing. It's adopted, but it's just growing. So I mean, with regards to the infrastructure and trading itself, you know, we've seen it grow exponentially, and we've been part of the growth. We've been part of shaping the growth. As you know, in the last couple of years, it's fragmented, but I don't think it's gonna. I mean, the character of Bitcoin options, for example, or crypto options, you know, they're not growing the path exactly like what we see in traditional assets. So you know, for example, FX options are traded almost 100% OTC. Stock options are traded almost 100% on exchange, on order book, and you know, Bitcoin options is a bit half. So you know, it's taking a different path, it's taking its own path. It's a bit of a hybrid product. The same way with Spot or Delta One. You know, you have a few exchanges that dominate, and then you have a lot of OTC guys that trade big volumes as well. So you know, I don't think it's going to follow a very linear path. No, it started very exponentially. I mean, in traditional markets, you started with pit trading to, like, you know, to single dealers, to the aggregators. In crypto, you start off with electronic, and then you know, you sort of go backwards a little bit. So you know, it's not going to follow a similar path. I think the liquidity actually is very, very good for Bitcoin and Ether. There are a lot of risk takers out there, a lot of market makers. So you know, the liquidity is good. I think it's already becoming institutionalized, and you know, to us, it's really just similar market structures in the forwards, in the options, similar structured products, but just a different asset class. And it's that asset class that we believe in. So you know, we have been very keen to develop that. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, the future is good. I think a lot of the adoption is in place. A lot of the market structures are starting to form very well. You know, the missing piece is probably the regulator coming in and forcing everyone to adopt certain methods. We've tried that. But the nature of the industry is such that it's a bit fragmented, but not a bad thing. We're prop traders, we don't complain, we like this kind of inefficiencies. So I think the future is good, but I don't expect it to follow exactly the same path as traditional assets.
Yeah, nothing goes through the same path. I think it's you mentioned the stable coins at the beginning of the conversation, right? And ended up with the regulation. So there's a lot about the stable coins and the regulation happening right now in North America specifically, with the lending products that's been introduced by BlockFi, Celsius, and the likes. So I guess a lot of companies from developing world and developed world are migrating to managing their treasury and balance sheets in stable coins because of those efficiencies, right? You can earn yield, you can pay fast, it's low latency, right? So everything happens very fast in settlements. What do you guys think about the regulation? I mean, it's been so dynamic, it's changing so fast, right? You can't see around the corner, even if you have a lobby in your pocket, right? So, because there's so many different forces for and against the industry. So let's just touch upon general topic of regulation and everybody can talk from their own view. So Eric, maybe you should start.
Okay, I think that this topic intrigues me a lot. If I can take everyone back to sometime in April, right, this year, using the example of Singapore Central Bank and Thailand Central Bank, the Bank of Thailand. So they announced a collaboration of the launch of the world's first linkage of real-time payment system between the two countries. Okay, then several months later, just on yesterday, right? There's a joint statement by, again, the Singapore Central Bank and the SEC of Thailand about the launch of what we call the depository receipts linkage between the two exchanges, SGX and Stock Exchange of Thailand. Now, if we transpose these two things into the crypto world, what does it mean? It means currencies can be, stable coins can be linked, right, to be accepted on both countries because there's already a payment system that's being live recognized on both sides. Then you come on to the products that's listed on exchanges, where again, two countries, central banks recognize cross-border listings, which is the depository receipts. So the interesting part that we're looking at from a HTX perspective, and also on my own capacity, is to look at if these frameworks on a traditional asset space or traditional marketplace that already exists, could we augment that framework to the digital space? Yes, there are nuances. There's a lot of things to make known and to, I guess, educate. But I think the framework from a mature market is there. How can we augment it to the digital world? Case in point, DBS Bank in Singapore, first Asian bank to basically launch their own crypto exchange, which is never thought of. I mean, the only bank that I know is Signum Bank in Switzerland, right? That got the exchange to operate in the crypto space, right? But DBS Bank, that's something new, and we were surprised that on the home ground we were surprised that MES actually approved it, right? But so there's certain things that so from a regulatory standpoint, I think if we look at the mainstream market, it's happening. So how can we then augment it to the digital world? And I think that's the part where a lot of education and conversation that needs to be done with the regulator. And from my own experience, Central Bank of Singapore or MES is getting very friendly and wanting to know more and how they can facilitate. Yeah, so that's my observation. Over to you, Max.
Thanks, Eric. Sometimes it's hard to, if it's something that's never existed into the predefined frameworks, right? Especially right now, what we see here in North America, that the regulators are not very advanced and not very active, right? Mm. And everybody's preserving their own interest to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. And everybody's trying to box a certain activity into the pre-existing frameworks of the regulation. So I think it's good that some things click, right, in terms of the adoption of or traditional regulatory framework into the crypto. But I'm more in favor of the Zook, or the start a blank page approach. So Ali, up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think one of the challenges that we've seen since the early days of crypto has just been, and it's with really any innovation, and when you start involving, regulators, is oftentimes they don't really have a way to deal with innovation effectively. And when they do, so you saw sort of this big push, around the world for regulators to have these sandboxes sort of over the last decade, right? And what we've seen is a lot of these sandboxes don't even work. It's essentially what'll happen is, these startups or these organizations will apply to these sandboxes, and then they'll share their ideas with the regulator, and the regulator just says no. And that's not the point of these sandboxes. And so you see some countries actually do this quite well. So I mean, we've directly worked with MAS and have been super impressed at how collaborative they are. I've never seen anything like it. But we hear just the horror stories in other places where it's just like there's not even a point to these mechanisms because they're just so broken. And I think this is where regulators, I think, really need to get their act together in some of these places, because it's not just innovation in this sector, right? Like this is not a problem just with crypto or blockchain. Like we're talking about any sector. And there's going to continue to be innovation in the world. There's going to be new innovative products across any sort of, sectors relating to finance or otherwise that, might fall under their purview. And they need to find ways to be able to understand these things and give it a fair chance. And, let's see what sort of happens with some of this stuff, as long as it's not going to, directly say hurt the public in a significant way, and they can monitor it and turn off the tap if it is creating an issue. Like I think that's important. And so this has just been something I've been very conscious of, and I think you're starting to see that spread on where regulators have been open to these conversations and understanding. It just widens that gap now between these regions, and it's very clear in such a short amount of time. We're talking about in only say 4 or 5 years, you're seeing how big of an impact that's making, and that's the regulators making then on, an industry thriving or dying essentially in those jurisdictions. And, you've seen, for example, in Ontario, like this has been, I think, a real problem. Like a lot of the early day innovation actually came out of Ontario and Canada in the crypto space. I mean, you had Ethereum born there and others, and all of it's gone, right? I mean, you look like a lot of that sort of had to leave because it just couldn't work under that regulatory framework, and that's a very big problem when you then take that into consideration on what would have been the economic impact and the impact on jobs and all of these other factors, and all the secondary and effects onwards from those innovations in that region. So this has, I think, been a real problem with some regulators, and it's been also a real opportunity for others that we're already seeing.
Mm. And I think if I may just interrupt, Ali, you have regulators that are also sending mixed signals, right? On one hand, they say that you can do, or you can't do this, but on the other hand, they're doing it. So, case in point, I was talking to someone from the family office in North Asia, and he says that as an association, his members had to basically relocate out from the country that is stripping away, or tightening up the regulation on wealth management, on cryptos and stuff, that they can't operate anymore in that country. So they had to move out, right? So we do see that thing happening with regulators. But at the same time, if I may add, from an innovation standpoint, I was talking to a regulator and also the legal firm about, say, for example, tokenization or monetization of IP rights, say, for example, in a biotech firm or a medtech firm. And both came back to say, can you do that? I said, why not? I mean, if there's a tangible value, you could securitize it with a framework around it. So legal, you got to figure out how to legalize it or write a paper on it. Regulator, we will come back to you on a structure. And as long as you are open-minded, we can structure it and make it a security, because it's a tangible asset to an extent. And they found it very intriguing, but no one is talking about it. So I think that's the part about innovation of products at the same time to the regulator in that sense. Yeah. So over to you, Max. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ali did reinforce, I mean, your point about differentiation, right? And right now, West and East, or you can say multiple different countries right in the middle, that Canada is an example, right? A very good example, Ali. I do support that point, and I think that it reinforces the Singapore, right? It's been a mecca as well in Dubai for innovation recently, right? So, I mean, definitely regulators drive the change, but they are also afraid of the change. To your point, Eric, I mean, they think about jobs, they think about stimulus, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And when you say we can digitalize lawyers, right, or digitalize half of your administration workforce, I mean, there's a lot to think about. So to Ali's point again, the AI, privatization, change of workforce environment, that all does affect everything, not only crypto, right? So the regulation does affect, and there we see a lot of different disciplines that interconnected. So I mean, very good points. Darius, what's your take on the regulation from your standpoint and your experience?
Oh, I can't speak for the other regulators, but we interact a lot with MES. So I mean, it's a very tricky question, right? Because there really is no silver bullet for dealing with crypto. There are a lot of legitimate issues that they are afraid of, and things they have to deal with. I think Singapore's approach has been good. I think it's effectively is a bit of a buying time kind of approach. Buying time to see what the rest of the world does. I think that's the way the Singapore regulator has always done it, to see what the US does, to see what China does. And in this case, they have bought time and, had taken this wait and see approach, but they have been pretty clear on what they require from players in Singapore. And I think this clarity has been very good. So I mean, I don't think they are shy to admit that there are issues that are difficult to solve. Stuff like travel rule, identification of wallets. But they have set forth clear regulations, not extremely friendly. Perhaps even slightly onerous, but at least clear. And I think that clarity has become something that crypto guys have held on to. So we do see an influx of players coming into Singapore. We used to complain that we were quite lonely in Singapore because the events were always in Hong Kong or in the US. But now everyone is coming to Singapore. It's going to be a bit of a crypto party here because literally everyone is in Singapore, and they're not only are they having a small office with people, 1-2 people in Singapore, but the management, the UBOs are all in Singapore. I mean, Ali is an example of that as well, right? He's in Singapore now, and we just had a beer a couple of days ago. So everyone's in Singapore. Singapore's becoming crypto capital of the world, and I think that's testament to
maybe also because of the COVID rules,
regulations.
right? I mean, it does affect the travel right now and the relocation. So maybe
no, I think this is in spite of the COVID rules. So I think once COVID blows over, you see Singapore become, I think the next all the big events are going to be here. So it's good for us, it's good for everybody. I mean, it's not great because property prices are going up, but other than that, I think it's fantastic. And I think that's
the good,
Yeah, and I think that it's a result of the clarity in regulation, right? So I don't think you get this clarity anywhere else, because I mean, let's say if you're in China doing OTC, you're illegal. If you are in Hong Kong, it's an opt-in regulation, but you're not sure whether you're gonna opt in or not. And if you're in the US, if you're doing a boring lending business, you might get screwed anytime, so I mean, who knows? So I think Singapore has done a pretty good job.
Very good point. Very good point, Darius. Guys, from regulation, I mean, how about we talk a little bit about non-regulation, right? So everybody knows DeFi has been big on Ethereum, right? Has been growing as crazy. And a bit of our topic today is Bitcoin. So let's touch upon the DeFi specifically, and let's touch upon if DeFi can exist on Bitcoin network. So Ali, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think just sort of on that, premise. I mean, I think DeFi has been big on a lot of different chains, right? So, I mean, you could take, for example, Binance Smart Chain. It's been massive as well,
Yeah.
right? And so, and I think what's happening is it's opening up, entire ecosystems, to people. I think it's creating really interesting mechanisms to have them involved in the ecosystem, to have exposure to it, obviously to generate returns, which has been good. I think it still is, in reality, it's still early, right? I think the big potential of DeFi, and while it's blown up and gotten really, really big, I think the real potential is, can this actually help to start solve some of the challenges in the unbanked world over time, right? And I think there's huge potential. I think there is a very high likelihood in the long run that we can make a very big dent in some of these challenges, but it will continue to take time, right? From a knowledge perspective and training and et cetera, right? In terms of DeFi, existing on Bitcoin, I mean, I haven't seen maybe as much of it happening, but I'm sure over time it will. I mean, there's a lot of incredible people in this space building layers on top of Bitcoin, et cetera, that I'm sure it will happen. I wouldn't be surprised. It could make sense, but I at least haven't seen it yet, so I'm not sure if it's very close in the rearview mirror yet.
Okay, Eric, what's your take on the DeFi and Bitcoin?
Well, I think I echo the same comment about Ali about whether DeFi would be on the Bitcoin, but I wouldn't rule it out, given the fact that now you have the things like your GameFi in the marketplace, which no one actually thought of, right? And then now you have Uniswap, and stuff like that. So I think it goes back to your first question about what's the future, right? I think it's unwritten right now. Plain sheet of paper, it can happen, but I think the question is when. Yeah. So
Darius, are you guys doing anything on DeFi? What's your vision on that? And
yeah, no. As to your question, whether DeFi on Bitcoins, I mean, if you mean strictly DeFi on the Bitcoin chain,
DeFi
I mean,
application on the
yeah,
Bitcoin.
exactly. But no, but we have seen Bitcoin on DeFi, or rather, yeah. So no, I mean, yeah, we have seen Bitcoin on DeFi. So not DeFi on Bitcoin, but Bitcoin on DeFi. So you have WBTC, Run BTC, and I mean, Tranches, for example, is a Bitcoin DeFi project. They have 1.4 billion in TVL. We are supporters of the project as well. So there is a lot of Bitcoin.
Project? What was the name of the project?
Tranches, so TRANCHESS, and you do have a lot of options to do Bitcoin on DeFi. So the answer is yes if you flip it around. But in terms of DeFi, no, I think we are very, very excited about DeFi. I think there are some issues like Ali mentioned. From a very purely derivatives perspective, it's extremely exciting because it's a very new way of doing things. There are some issues like without because without a intermediary, you do have some issues with leverage, margining, collateralization, these kind of issues. So these are issues that could be structural, but there are ways to solve it, right? For example, we dominate a lot of the options on DeFi. So trading it on an order book and under collateralized with margin, very difficult. But if you trade in a vault style, so for example, folks can stake their dollars, their coin, and then you have the settlement on chain, you have the contracts done on chain, but the risk managed off chain. So your Delta one can be managed on chain, but your Beta, your Gamma, Vega has to be off chain. Then it's fine, and then that's very scalable. So you see projects like Ribbon Finance, you see projects like StakeDAO starting to do that, and it's very, very scalable. I mean, it's very impressive, right? I mean, for us, it took us 3 years to build a $2 billion book. These guys out of London, young kids, they do it in 2 months and they raise 150 million. I'm like, whoa! I mean, it's like it's it's powerful, right? And you know, they raised 150 million
yeah.
because of the cap. You know, they can't take the capacity. So you know, like I said, you know, it is quite a powerful thing to democratize access. You know, I thought our access was democratic enough, but you know, with the KYC and everything, you know, you struggle, right? The moment you democratize access, you suddenly give people the power to earn money. You see the interest there. So I think that's real power of DeFi. I think that's something that will improve greatly. I know for a fact that MAS is looking very closely at this. You know, they routinely try and engage the DeFi market, but it is a struggle for them, right? You know, they need permission markets, right? So you know, as the regulators come in, you know, more players come in and people start to understand the power of DeFi, I think it would become an everyday thing, right? If you ask all the crypto players now how much money they have in banks versus how much they have in DeFi, I mean, let's say Ali and me, I guarantee you the banks don't have a lot less than what we have on in our wallets. So it's a shift. It's a shift from people putting money,
Wall
you know,
Street to Main Street.
yeah. So I think that shift is already happening. It will shift more. I mean, I might be talking more like a crypto native here, but you know, I don't even have enough in my bank to be a DBS Treasures member, but you know, it's all in DeFi. So you know, I think that shift is going to happen soon. Yeah.
I think to add on though to Darius's point, right? Like you've got this traditional side that requires KYC, AML, and it's there's reasons for these things. It's not like there's no reasons for it, but then you look at if you impose or keep those rules as is, there's no way you're solving an unbanked problem, right? Like we've got over 1 billion people that don't have identity. Like they're not like identification. They're not going to be able to KYC if they don't have identification. And so we've got a really big problem here. And I think it's a choice to make and figuring out how can we do this by still eliminating or minimizing bad actors, but creating something that's inclusive for everyone. Or the flip side is a conscious decision to keep them out of the system, right? Because it's not, oh, by accident now they're left out of the system. We have tools that can include them. So it's a conscious decision on whether we deliberately leave them out as sort of a way that sort of financial regulation and approach, these industries go, or do we figure out how to actually make this more inclusive and then create new tools or new ways, or even some of the existing tools to minimize these bad actors, track wallets effectively, know what's happening, right?
I think the Darius and Elliot, you guys brought up two very interesting buzzwords: democratizing investments, right? Or democratizing private fundraising. Ellie, you mentioned about unbanked and stuff like that. So it just goes back to my thinking about DBS Bank, right? They obviously created this digital bank or digital area of business, or your crypto exchange, your custodians and stuff like that. Well, it's essentially, to me, it's like saying, okay, now they are taking a dip into saying, okay, let's try this. Let's offer cryptocurrency stuff to internal customers and see how they can manage it, right? And then eventually, hopefully, it then gets into the mainstream market where, Darius and I, who also, are not DBS Treasury customers, we can actually then partake in the cryptocurrency trading through the bank. That it's now a bank that's doing it, and so I think it's very interesting. It's about coming to the again, back to the first question, the future, where we see this bridge of cryptocurrency from the unregulated world weaving into the framework, but not to say restricting, but democratizing in a way to also cut off bad actors.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to happen naturally from multiple different angles, right? I mean, I don't think any of us can control the process as much as we would like to. So I'm sure that there's natural progression from multiple different actors, as well as regulators and the banks, to get this industry moving forward and democratizing and banking and improving. Right?
And just one note, imagine if Darius couldn't come into the proprietary trading for crypto because of regulation, then there's no liquidity in some sense, right?
I think the gap is always going to be filled if there's money to be made.
Yes,
so there's definitely a competition to Darius, and Darius is playing a fair game and making his spot, right? Because he's maybe one of the best, right, to do what he's doing it. So I'm sure that the market is not open, and there's definitely various players, and that's how we move the market forward. There's a lot of competition in this market, in any angle we'll look at it. It's not a plain field. I mean, it's a very dynamic, regulated, and comprehensive market in any part of the world. Canada, US, Singapore, Russia, everything.
Yeah, just also, I wonder if you guys read the news about Forge Global in the US, which is in a space of digital securities, right? Listing of digital securities for private companies. They just went into a $2 billion SPAC listing, so it's also another, and then part of that, Coinbase got listed, right? So I think these things I would call on the tipping, edge of things that's evolving.
Yeah, as far as they're going to the public markets, but I mean, this is a completely different discussion. I would say. The valuations today, the SPAC mechanism, and the public markets, it's a separate story.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks a lot. Listen, it's been a great talk. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, interesting to hear different opinions from different backgrounds. I think it's been a very productive conversation. So hopefully, we all will also put our money right where we talk, right, and make sure that that industry moves forward and will prosper, as well as help the others do good and do well. Right, that's what it is all about. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. All right. Have a good day.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.